My dad disowned me after I refused to be their wallet, so I said nothing, pulled my money, and let the truth collapse what I'd been holding up. It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday. Calls with clients, team check-ins, maybe a late lunch with Evelyn from Ops. Instead, I sat at my desk in downtown Denver, staring at my phone in disbelief. The message was short, brutal: I disown you. All communication through my lawyer. No greeting, no punctuation beyond the final period, no emotion, even for someone as calculated as my father. I reread it twice, then again, a few more times just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. But it didn't change. It never does it? Words once center like bullets. And this one hit. It's not like I hadn't seen it coming. For years, I'd carried this family on my back. When Dad's logistics business in Fort Collins started tanking in 2016, I stepped in. I moved my own company's contracts his way, rebuilt his digital infrastructure from the ground up, and swallowed losses just to keep him solvent because he was my father. Liam, my younger brother, never had to lift a finger. His failures were always learning experiences. Every time he blew through another 5-figure investment or left another job under unfair conditions, I was the one bailing him out. I paid off his debts, paid for his apartment, even bought him a second-hand SUV last year after he crashed the first one drunk on New Year's Eve. But this time was different. Last weekend, they'd asked me to co-sign a new loan for Liam, of course. A passion project, a tech startup with no product, no plan, and a pitch deck that looked like it was thrown together during a hangover. I said no. For the first time in 15 years, I said no. The room went quiet like I'd set off a bomb. Dad had stared at me, eyes narrowed behind his glasses. "You're turning your back on your family." "I'm not turning my back," I said calmly. "I'm just done being your safety net." Liam scoffed. "Wow. The golden son's finally grown a spine." Mom stayed quiet. She always did. I walked out of the house that day with my jaw clenched, hand shaking, but my decision solid. Now, 2 days later, I was reading the fallout. I disown you. All communication through my lawyer. No hesitation this time. I opened a new message and typed one word: understood. Then I set the phone down and turned to my laptop. See, what Gregory didn't factor into his calculated little drama was that our businesses still shared a joint account. One I had created when I took over the back end of his failing operation and poured in my own capital to keep it afloat. And in that moment, something in me flipped. I logged into the corporate banking portal. I still had access, still had authorization. I withdrew every cent that was mine, plus the additional $46,000 I had injected this past quarter. Total, $182,000, legally mine. All documented, all backed up. Then I closed every open vendor line I'd opened under Nexus Resources, not out of spite, out of necessity. If I was no longer part of the family, then they no longer had access to my support, my funds, or my name. By noon, the first emails from Gregory's accounting team started trickling in, panicked, confused. At 2:18 p.m., Liam called 3 times. I didn't answer. And then at 3:41 p.m., my mother's name lit up on my screen. I hesitated before tapping ignore. At 4:12 p.m., a voicemail came in. I let it sit, and then came the message I knew would come eventually, but not this soon. "What have you done, Daniel? The whole family is falling apart." For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Let it fall. The voicemail from Mom stayed unread for hours. It wasn't that I didn't care, that was the problem. I still did, far more than I wanted to admit. I told myself I was done, told myself it was just business now. But I knew the tremble in her voice, the kind that came when the image of control started slipping. By the next morning, I had a dozen missed calls, not just from Liam and my parents, but from a few mutual family friends, even my Uncle Keith, who hadn't spoken to me in 2 years. The silence that followed Gregory's message had detonated loud and frantic. At 8:42 a.m., an email came through from Gregory's lawyer, Alan Ferris. "Per your father's request, all correspondence moving forward will be handled through this office. Please do not contact him directly. Any withdrawal of business assets will be reviewed." I replied with a single attachment, a full ledger of my contributions to our joint business account, annotated with dates, wire receipts, and legal disclaimers. I ceased my own attorney, Danielle Navarro, and added one sentence: "Funds withdrawn were exclusively mine. My involvement in Gregory and Sons logistics is officially terminated." That was the line in the sand. I didn't go into the office that day. I knew better. Once news started spreading that I'd pulled my money, the vultures would start circling. Gregory's business was already bleeding. My withdrawal had just made it hemorrhage. Instead, I spent the morning at a cafe near Capitol Hill trying to think. The truth was I didn't have a plan, not really. For so long, my calendar, my emails, even my financial decisions were tied to them, to holding things together. It felt like cutting a cord that had been strangling me and holding me up at the same time. By lunchtime, I'd skimmed half a dozen messages from Liam. Most were angry. One stood out: "You seriously screwed us, man. Dad's freaking out. Mom's crying. You're proud of yourself?" No apology, no acknowledgement of the years I'd held things together, just blame. I didn't reply. Later that day, I finally listened to Mom's voicemail. Her voice was raw. "Daniel, please. I don't know what your father told you, but we can talk. The money's not the issue. We're just hurt. Everything's spiraling. Liam didn't mean to upset you. Just call me, please." It's dumb, not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. No one ever meant to upset me, they just did, and then expected me to patch it up. I forwarded the voicemail to my therapist. That night, Ethan dropped by my place. He didn't say much, just handed me a bottle of dark beer, collapsed onto my couch, and pulled up a football stream on his phone. We watched in silence for a while, the kind of quiet only old friends could share. "Think they'll sue?" he asked eventually, not looking up. "They can try," I said. "I've documented everything. The money was mine." He nodded. "Then screw 'em." I let out a dry laugh. Easier said than done. Ethan gave me a sideways glance. "You're allowed to be angry, Dan. You don't have to make it look noble. They betrayed you. That's not business, it's personal." He was right. Of course, it had always been personal. The money, the guilt, the expectations, none of it had ever just been business. I spent that night drafting a list, not of legal next steps or business contacts, but something simpler, just 2 columns. Things I owe them. Things they owe me. The first list was blank. 2 days after the voicemail, I heard nothing more from my father. No follow-up from his lawyer either, which told me everything I needed to know. They were scrambling. What Gregory hadn't considered was that I'd been preparing for this moment longer than I even realized. Quietly, methodically, I'd kept records of every cent I funneled into his business, contracts, communications, personal funds disguised as temporary loans. At the time, I kept them for tax purposes, or so I thought. But deep down, I think I knew this day would come. Still, it wasn't easy, even knowing I was in the right. Grief doesn't always feel like loss, it often feels like freedom laced with guilt. Ethan said as much when he swung by again that Friday. "You're not grieving missing people who treated you like garbage," he said between sips of his drink. "It's just conditioning. You spent years being the hero. Now you don't have a cape, and you don't know who you are without it." I didn't respond at first, I was still chewing on that phrase, the hero without a cape. It was true. Somewhere along the way, I let myself become a function in that family, a solution, never a son. Later that night, I opened an old file on my laptop labeled Inheritance Planning. It was from 4 years ago, when I'd helped Gregory restructure the estate, liquid assets, the warehouse properties, even the downtown Fort Collins office that Liam had wanted to turn into a cigar lounge. I'd put in days of work, sleepless nights, smoothing it all out because Gregory trusted my mind, even if he never respected my voice. But now the irony was rich. The man who once called me the backbone of the operation had wiped me from the family with one sentence. I stared at the folder and hovered over the delete key. Then I minimized it and closed the lid. Not yet. The next morning, Chloe called, my cousin on my mom's side, always the one person in the family who actually listened. "I just heard what happened," she said. "Uncle Greg, he's telling people you hacked into the account." I laughed bitterly. "Of course he is. Never underestimate the power of delusion." Chloe was quiet a moment. "You okay?" "No, but I'm getting there." "I believe you," she said softly. "And I'm proud of you for standing up to him. We all watched it for years, you carrying everything while Liam coasted. You're not crazy, Daniel. You're just done." Her words echoed louder than she probably realized. "You're not crazy. You're just done." That evening, I got a message from Liam, not a call this time, just a single line: "You ruined everything." I didn't reply. What was there to say? But I sat with the words longer than I'd like to admit, not because they hurt, but because they felt eerily familiar. I realized I'd been told that, or some version of it, most of my life. Anytime I didn't step in or fix something or give up a piece of myself for their convenience, "You ruined everything." It was never true. And this time, I didn't even consider believing it. Instead, I pulled up a blank note on my phone and typed a new phrase: "You didn't ruin anything. You just stopped protecting what should have collapsed a long time ago." That was the moment I knew I wasn't going back. The first thing I noticed was the quiet, not just around me, but inside me. No buzzing phone, no emergency emails from my father's accountant, No cryptic text messages from Liam about tight deadlines and short-term float. The chaos had been silenced, and in its place was a vacuum I wasn't prepared for. I kept expecting the other shoe to drop. I even charged my phone overnight out of habit. But in the morning, there was nothing. And yet, I wasn't at peace. I was twitchy, distracted. Not because I missed them, but because I'd spent so long managing their noise, I didn't know how to handle stillness. That Wednesday, I walked a few aimless loops around Cheeseman Park. It was quiet except for the breeze and the occasional jogger. Denver was in its in-between season, too cold for spring, too soft for winter. It matched how I felt, unsettled, waiting for something to bloom, but unsure what. Later that afternoon, I got a fraud alert from the bank, a failed transfer attempt from the Gregory and Sons logistics account. Someone, most likely Liam, had tried to shift funds through an old company expense line that was no longer active. My legal withdrawal had closed all their access points, but apparently they hadn't gotten the memo. I flagged the activity and forwarded it to Danielle. Her reply was quick and dry: "The separation is airtight. Let them waste their time." It should have felt like a win. Instead, I just felt tired. That night, Chloe sent me a message. "Mom says Aunt Susan's calling around trying to get people to stage some sort of intervention. Apparently, you've gone unhinged." "Ah, yes," I replied. The classic boundaries equal instability logic. "You know how they are," she texted. "If you're not sacrificing yourself for the collective, you're defective." "Well, then," I typed. "Consider me happily defective." She responded with a heart. "Good. Stay that way." Still, the whispers stung more than I cared to admit. I wasn't angry at the lies, they were expected. What hurt was how quickly people were willing to believe them. The next evening, Ethan dragged me to a casual birthday gathering for one of his coworkers. I almost bailed, but he didn't give me the option. "You're coming. You need to remember how normal people operate." The brewery on Colfax was warm, noisy, full of life. No one knew who I was. No one cared about Gregory and Sons. No one asked what I could do for them. At first, I felt like a guest in someone else's life, out of place, half listening. But eventually something shifted. I was laughing, talking, existing. Someone asked what I did. I told them I was between chapters. They nodded, no follow-up, no judgment. It hit me later as I walked home how foreign that kind of space had become. My value had always been tied to what I could offer, not who I was. That night, I opened my old estate planning folder. For years of work, balance sheets, asset appraisals, contingency documents I built by hand. All to preserve something that was never mine. I hovered over the delete button. My finger twitched, but I didn't press it. Instead, I renamed the folder, Closed Chapters. Then I opened a new one, Daniel's Life. It was empty, but it was mine. And for now, that was enough. The next sign of trouble came in the form of a group email. It was a thinly veiled attack, CC'd to nearly a dozen family members, cousins, uncles, even a great-aunt I hadn't spoken to in years. Sent from Gregory's work email with the subject line, "Setting the record straight." I knew better than to open it, but I did anyway. It was 4 paragraphs of polished venom. He framed it like a professional update. "After a difficult transition period, unfortunate disruption of internal operations." And then, "My eldest son, Daniel, has chosen to sever ties and liquidate assets critical to this company's function, all without family consultation or approval." That last line burned more than I expected. Family consultation. As if this was a boardroom and not a lifetime of unreciprocated sacrifice. As if I hadn't spent years asking, pleading for accountability. I didn't respond. Neither did most of the CC'd names, but a few replies trickled in throughout the day. One from a second cousin: "Sorry to hear things got messy. Hope it smooths over." Another from an uncle I always liked: "If you need anything, let me know. I've been there." Small cracks in the silence, enough to remind me that not everyone bought Gregory's version of the truth. Still, the emotional weight settled hard on my chest. I wasn't embarrassed, I was weary. The way the past keeps clawing for relevance even after you've moved on. That email was a last-ditch power move, an attempt to make the story official before I had a chance to rewrite it. That night, Chloe called. "I saw the email," she said. "Yeah," I muttered. "He's going all in. You know he's bluffing, right? He's trying to scare you into backing down." "I know. It just sucks to see it written out like that." "I get it," she said. "But it's also kind of impressive how calm you are. A year ago, this would have wrecked you." I exhaled through a smile. A year ago, I'd have written a 1,000-word rebuttal and spent 2 days defending myself. And now I'm thinking about deleting the email and going to sleep. "Progress," she said. "Proud of you." That night I didn't sleep, but not out of anxiety. I stayed up drafting ideas, real ones, a consulting service for small businesses struggling to modernize operations. I even outlined a rough pitch deck, added a list of potential leads from contacts I hadn't spoken to in years. It felt real, not a reaction, not a detour, a direction. Ethan texted the next morning, "You up? Want breakfast? I'm hungover and need moral support." I replied, "Only if you pay. I'm morally fragile, too." We met at a Greasy Spoon diner on 17th. He looked like hell, I didn't. "So," he said between bites of hash browns. "What's next?" I sipped my coffee. "I think I'm going to launch something. Small, but mine." He raised an eyebrow. "About time. You've been building other people's dreams for a decade. Maybe now you build yours." His words echoed long after we parted. Later that afternoon, I finally deleted Gregory's email, not out of defiance, but because it no longer mattered. The next blow arrived quietly, a knock on the door. No one there, just a thick cream-colored envelope on the mat. The return address listed a firm I didn't recognize. New name, same game. I knew what it was before I even opened it. 3 pages of vaguely threatening, performative language dressed up as concern. Gregory was now seeking reparative mediation for misappropriated funds, citing emotional distress and the destabilization of shared family assets. There it was, the legal version of a temper tantrum. I handed it to Danielle without saying a word. She sat at the breakfast bar, hair in a messy bun, scanning the document with the calm of someone flipping through a takeout menu. She closed it after one read. "This is theater. There's no legal standing and they know it." I nodded. "That's not the point. He's not trying to win, he's trying to wear me down." Danielle didn't blink. "Then don't let him." It was that simple and that hard. Later that day, I got a voicemail from my aunt, the first I'd heard from her since all this started. She didn't mention the letter, didn't ask how I was. Instead, her voice came wrapped in sugar and history. "Do you remember when you helped me move into my first apartment? You were what, 12? You worked all day without complaint. Your father was so proud. I hope you know how much this has hurt him. He may never say it, but it's eating him alive." Click. No apology, no accountability, just a slow drip guilt trip meant to pull me back. I forwarded the voicemail to Chloe. She called immediately. That was a guilt sandwich on gaslighting bread. I snorted. It was weirdly nostalgic. "She's dangling emotional crumbs to lure you back. Don't eat them." "I'm not. I'm done being hungry for scraps." There was a pause. "That's a line," she said softly. "Keep that one." That night, I reopened the Daniel's Life folder, still mostly empty, a few budget sheets, a doc with vague business name ideas. But now I added a new file, what I actually want. I sat there for a minute before typing anything. Then, a morning where I'm not bracing for something, clients I don't have to perform for, boundaries that don't need explaining, a chair that doesn't hurt my back, silence that feels like peace, not tension. The list wasn't poetic, it was honest, unfiltered, mine. The next morning, Ethan let himself in like he always did. He tossed a grocery bag on the counter, kombucha, peanut M&Ms, and 2 bananas. The man was chaos, I thought. "I brought health and rot," he declared. "Balance." I raised an eyebrow. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion. Just figured you needed someone to sit and not ask you how you're doing." I smiled. "You're right." He flopped onto the couch and scrolled his phone. Eventually, I told him about the letter and the voicemail. He didn't offer advice, just sat with it. After a while, he said, "You know what? Your dad sounds like a guy trying to log into a version of you that doesn't exist anymore." I smiled. Account deactivated. Password changed. We clinked kombuchas, no cheers, just understanding. That afternoon, I grabbed a sticky note and wrote, "Check biz registry," not to prove anything to Gregory, just to prove I existed outside him. And in my doc, I added, "A life where I get to write the damn list." The envelope was slipped under my door again. No stamp, no return address, but I knew the script. This time, the target wasn't me directly, it was my landlord. The letter was dressed up in formality, concern over tenancy risks due to unresolved business disputes, citing ethical concerns about the shared liability of residents with financial conflicts. It didn't name me, but it didn't have to. The subtext wasn't even subtle. Gregory hadn't just switched tactics, he was expanding the battlefield. I stood in the hallway holding the envelope like it might stain. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I could feel my pulse behind my teeth. Danielle got to work faster than I could explain it. "He's bluffing," she said, typing rapidly at my kitchen counter. "I'll email your landlord with full documentation, your withdrawal records, LLC closure, the clean split. He won't touch it." She hit send and looked up. This isn't new to people like him. They escalate when they lose control. You're not doing anything wrong. The lump in my throat wasn't fear, it was something I hadn't expected. Relief to be believed, to be defended, not because I begged, but because someone saw the truth and stood next to it. That night, I didn't try to meditate or write or distract myself. I just sat, lights low, windows open, letting the air move through the room like something being cleared out. Chloe called around 9. "Tell me," she said, skipping any greeting. "He sent something to my landlord trying to make me look unstable." There was a beat of silence. "Of course he did," she said. "It's control in a trench coat, legal intimidation dressed up as concern." She waited. "You okay?" "Yeah. Just tired of how many ways someone can say I own you without saying it out loud." "You're breaking the cycle," she said. "It's supposed to feel messy." We talked for a while, not about him, but about weather and weird podcasts and what she was growing in her windowsill garden. The conversation drifted like water, not forced, just present. Before bed, I opened the doc again. What I actually want. New lines, a mailbox I'm not afraid to open, friends who stay without needing a reason, a living room where I can just breathe. When I finished, I closed the laptop but left the list up on the screen. Let it be the last thing the room saw before I slept. The next evening, Ethan came over with Thai takeout and a random pack of sparkler candles. "We're celebrating something," he said, lighting one and sticking it in a spring roll. "What exactly?" "No idea. Felt like it." We sat on the balcony, legs propped on the railing. He asked about the landlord letter, then didn't push, just listened. After a few bites, he said, "Your dad's launching denial campaigns. Meanwhile, you're building an actual life." I nodded. Then I said, without even meaning to, I renamed the folder. "Just life now?" He grinned. "That's the most rebellious thing you've done yet." We toasted spring rolls, no ceremony, just choice. A full week passed without an email, a call, a letter, no text from Gregory, no dramatic legal tone from anonymous firms, no paper slipped beneath my door, nothing. It should have felt like peace, but it felt like a held breath. Gregory's silence never came without strings. He didn't do surrender, he did strategy. I knew this wasn't absence, it was delay, a recalibration. Still, I used the space. I scrubbed the kitchen, took down the dry erase calendar filled with old business goals, donated a jacket he gave me last Christmas, still hanging with the tags on. I cleared voicemail notifications, deleted saved calls I had replayed too often, as if examining the right tone might have rewritten the content. Then Thursday morning, my landlord texted, "Got another letter, vague wording. Says you're entangled in some corporate volatility and that he's documenting concern for future safety." I didn't open it all the way. "Want me to forward?" I sat with that for a full minute before replying. Then I forwarded the message to Danielle. She called immediately. "He's recycling threats," she said. "There's no legal motion attached, just smoke. But I'll reply with full proof anyway. I'll CC the property manager and attach the LLC closure, the final bank statements, and the signed separation agreement." She paused, her voice softer. "Don't carry this like it's your fault. He's the one pouring gasoline. You're just walking away from the fire." That landed deeper than she probably realized. That night, I opened the doc again. What I actually want. This time, I typed slowly. Each entry was no longer a whisper. It was a decision. A home I'm not scared will be taken away. A version of success that doesn't feel like penance. A weekday morning I wake up without armor. The next evening, Chloe stopped by with a grocery bag full of randomness. Avocados, a candle labeled Midnight Fern, and a used copy of a novel with the cover half torn off. She held it up like a prize. "I want you to read this. You'll hate the beginning, and by chapter 9, you'll be feral." "I don't do feral," I said. "You don't yet." We brewed tea and sat on the floor like we used to in college. No screens, no playlists, just the hum of a city that finally wasn't screaming. At one point, I caught her glancing at my whiteboard, now blank except for a single sticky note that read, "Not about him. About you." She nodded toward it. "Keep that up." After she left, I didn't go back to my laptop. I lit the candle. I read the first 3 pages of the book. I didn't love it, but I didn't put it down either. The next morning, Ethan texted at 8:02, "Breakfast or intervention? You pick." I texted back, "Both." He showed up with bagels, orange juice, and a $1 scratch ticket. For luck. We ate on the balcony with the kind of comfortable silence that feels like friendship and therapy. "You're building something," he said, no lead in. "I can see it. You don't even flinch anymore." I didn't have to respond, I just handed him the scratcher. After he left, I opened the life folder, not the list, a new doc, possibility. No bullet points, no plan, just the title, and beneath it a single sentence: "There is no version of me I owe to anyone else." The next week didn't bring a letter, it brought a phone call from an unfamiliar number with a local area code. I let it go to voicemail. The message was brief, male voice, polished, legal adjacent. "Mr. Ames, this is Richard Flores from the Office of Small Business Ethics and Oversight. We received a flagged concern about one of your past entities and would like to schedule a brief phone call to clarify your current involvement. Please respond within 5 business days. No emotion, no accusation, just enough formality to raise a heartbeat." I didn't call back, I sent the recording to Danielle. She responded 10 minutes later, looping in her firm's senior compliance consultant who had already drafted a reply. "You're in the clear," she said. "This is posturing, likely an anonymous tip from someone trying to keep a dying narrative alive." Gregory wasn't giving up, but he was starting to look like someone trying to fight shadows. I sat with that. The man who had once controlled my time, money, and energy now had nothing but suggestions and signatures. He couldn't punish me, he could only petition the world to do it for him. And the world, it wasn't answering anymore. That night, I printed out my list for the first time, not for dramatic effect, just because it felt real enough to hold now. I didn't frame it or post it, I folded it once and tucked it into the inside cover of my notebook. A quiet ritual, a way of saying, "I believe me." Chloe came by later, bearing cookies shaped like stars and a used copy of a travel guide to Iceland. "I'm not saying you need to leave," she said. "I'm saying maybe you start dreaming about somewhere you're not always recovering." She sipped her tea, eyes on the window. "You've been unlearning for so long. Maybe it's time to start learning something new." Later, when she left, I opened the possibility doc again. I didn't add a list, just a sentence: "What if healing isn't just mending what broke, but building what was missing?" The next morning, I made coffee without checking my phone first. It hit me halfway through the first sip, that used to be automatic. Wake, scroll, brace. Now, I woke and I brewed and I was just here. Ethan texted at noon. "Window open?" I texted back, "Always." He climbed through like a raccoon, tossed a lemon into my lap. "What's this? Symbolism? Make something with it." We sat by the window for a long time. He read silently. I opened my laptop. Not to write a list, not to draft a legal response, just to read over what I'd already written. And then I added one more thing, not to the list, not to the doc, to my calendar. Monday, 10 a.m., business registry appointment. For the first time, it wasn't a shield. It wasn't proof I was doing fine. It was motion, mine. As I closed the laptop, I realized something. Gregory wasn't falling apart, that wasn't the point. I didn't need him to collapse. I just needed to stop shrinking every time he took a breath. And I had.